Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast, and we are back on the back of Man City beating Spurs by 1-0 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I'm joined by three of our returning regular guests who are going to give you therapy and more on this Last Word on Spurs. If you're with us for the very, very first time, you can find us on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. Of course, on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we're on Blue Sky too. I'm joined by two of the greatest actors in the land. TJ Ramini, Darren Hartman returns, as does myself, and Miles over there at the Spurs Kings. Why do I always open ourselves up for that line, as me and Miles just feel completely inadequate as I bring that line to the casting zone now. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Like I say, we're for the first time. We really appreciate your support. Before we bring in the match facts and stats, look, that defeat to Man City for Spurs is only the second time in six Premier League visits Man City have beaten Tottenham Hotspur at home in the Premier League. They have now done it in back-to-back seasons in the domestic campaign of the Premier League. Let's bring you in the match facts and the stats from that game, where it finished Spurs 0, Man City 1. Spurs 11 shots to Man City's 12. Tottenham edging the shots on target 6-5. Touches in the penalty box. City shading that 29-27. City also missing 3 big chances compared to Tottenham in the game. Tottenham edging the tackles 25-18. Clearances, City edging at 18-15. Interception-wise, City edging at 10-6. Tottenham slightly shading possession 55-45%, and XG, Spurs outdone by City on the day 2.28 to 1.19. So it did finish Tottenham 0, Man City 1 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in a game where I think it's fair to say City probably the much better side in the first half. Spurs on top for a number of spells in the second half. They had chances through the likes of Odegaard and Sarr, and got themselves into really good positions. And Odegaard, actually, to be fair to him, did improve as the game went on. But look, we created chances. We just lacked that killer instinct. And it just feels really now, I think for those maybe coming away from the game, where I know for many it felt quite a flat atmosphere, that is quite simply now Europa League or bust for Tottenham. We'll open up with Tej. Tej, thoughts on the game, where obviously a lot of headlines were made really before the game of the amount of changes Ange Postecoglou did make ahead of the team.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's always disappointing when you lose a football match, but we have to be pragmatic. And of course, we're Tottenham fans, so it's not like we don't know this feeling. We know it rather well, sadly.
Too well.
But again, we've sorry, mate.
I said too well this season, unfortunately.
Yeah, too well, brother. Yeah, too well. And but look, man, we've all on this panel spoken before about manner of defeat, effort, application, all that kind of thing. I mean, listen, in the first half, we just didn't play very well. And I think that the main difference is that our distribution to our wingers was so poor in the first half. We just couldn't get Odegaard or Johnson on the ball. I remember at least 5 or 6 overhit passes from Porro, from Gray, from Danso, from Bentancur, from Maddison. We just couldn't find those wide men. And Doku and Savinho, whenever they wanted the ball, they received it, particularly Doku. And, he's an outstanding player. But in the second half, we found our feet a little more and moved the ball around well and created chances. It wasn't our day today, boys, but we are prioritizing Europe, which is what we should be doing. This season is cooked, guys. Even if, Jason said it so wisely, we'll probably finish with about 50 points, which is going to end us between 12th and maybe 9th, I would say. And so, yes, it's frustrating. And again, off the back of a loss, we're going to feel a little dour, understandably, but we're prioritizing Europe. Many, many positives, which we'll speak about later in the show, I'm sure. So I'm okay right now. We didn't capitulate, and that's the only thing that I can never forgive.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot of questions that are coming out of that display from Spurs. And again, there's a lot of questions around rotation, whether we rotated too much, whether we did rotate enough. And I think maybe some of those questions will be answered when it comes to next week and what we display in that first leg of that Europa League round of 16, first leg in AZ Alkmaar. But I think, Dad, to come over to you, it was a game of two halves, because we're looking at the game in general. City was so dominant in the first 45 and should have had more to really take into that half-time, apart from the Haaland 12-minute opener. But Spurs did respond well after the break and yet failed to take their chances. I thought we were so poor in that first half, where I come to the end of that game and I find it, for me, really hard to really make a case where Spurs should have really gone away with anything. Am I being harsh, or what's your gut feeling from that performance and that result?
You know what? It was a bit of a weird game to watch, because, like you said, the first half we were not really in the races, and City were playing pretty well, and you could see their outball. Doku he had Pedro's number. He had him. He knew anytime he got it, he knew he could beat him, and that was a problem for us. And I know we're going to get into, does he play Spence? Does he play Porro? The rotation of the team today, and everyone's thoughts on it. But in the second half, we went out of the game, and I think that's what this Tottenham squad has the ability to, is to stay in games. And I think when you rotate the team as he did today, there may have been another thought behind it, as well as Europe. There's also one of the things that I like to think about is when you have players that are leggy and are tired and not at their best, they're not 100%. Why start them? Because in theory, you're starting those players against other players who were at 100%. When the players came on, they've got more of a fighting chance, because suddenly they're meeting players that are tired and they're tired, and suddenly there could be a bit more of a game. And that's what we saw in the second half. You saw Son came on and he looked lively. Cooley came on, looked lively. They brought something to the game, and suddenly we had a bench that could do something. So it is a bit damned if you do, damned if you don't with Ange on rotation today, because people have been screaming for it. Then when you get it, you don't want it. And also, we've got to see if we decide if people like Odebear are good enough. They've been out for a long time. We've got to give them minutes to see if they're worthy of minutes. So it is a catch-22. And I think sometimes we've got to put the reality hat on and go, as TJ said, Europe may be the priority. If that's the priority, then we've actually got to prioritize it. If it's not, also, we know we're not winning anything in the league. So maybe these games can be used in different ways. And as fans, we've got to maybe appreciate that that is what it's going to be. I know it's hard when you paid hard-earned money and gone to the ground and you don't get the performance you want. And I totally hear that. I was meant to be there myself. I get it. And that's going to be a hard pill to swallow. But if it's for the development of this side and for the future of Spurs, maybe we can accept it a little bit more. So, yeah, that's my take on it right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's several feelings around that kind of same area, that at the moment there's players that definitely need minutes, the likes of Odebear for sure. A player that has, in this game itself made a comeback and his first start since the Coventry game. So he's going to need games between now and the end of the season. But there is that feeling out there as well that I can understand that, when we had got a 7-8 day wait until Eze Outmar, would it not have been the case where you could have started some of the more experienced players and then brought them off towards the end of the game? And again, that's football, isn't it? It's just really full of different opinions out there. Miles, to bring you in and your thoughts on the game. Look, there's no doubt about it. We made a lot more of a fist of the game in the second half. But City, as we said, should have really put the game out of sight in the first half. And I think we've been here so many times before where we can't help feeling frustrated with a lot of similar performances, the likes of Johnson, Porro. And I think, again, it indicates that game just how much we desperately need Dominic Solanke back. He's such an important player to the way we function, to the way we build up, to the way he holds up the ball for Spurs. What's your takeaways, Miles, from that defeat at home to City?
It was a massive risk by Ange. I say that I thought the lineup was obviously, he had to rotate. I get he had to rotate. The only person that I didn't get that he had to rotate was Spence. And the reason why I'm going to start with Spence is because Bergvall played 87 minutes on Saturday, and he's played more minutes over the last few months than Spence. So I don't get why Spence needed rotating out when he's probably been our best fullback. He probably watched Liverpool, Manchester City, since he's a Liverpool fan, and saw what Doku was doing to Trent. And he thought that Porro was the best answer to that. So I'm kind of going, you took a massive risk, because we could have been 3 or 4-0 down in that first half, and it would have been out of sight. The second half only becomes relevant because Manchester City missed all their chances. However, let me get back to being a positive person. The second half was such a great showing from what I saw, but there's just positive and negatives that all come out of this display today. And I'm not going to sit there and bash Ange, but this is the sort of starting lineup I wanted him to play last season when we played Manchester City and Arsenal going for the title. I want to see what his excuse is for today, because he was last year. He was going, I want to be in a title race. I want to do this. I want to play my best team against the best teams. Outman's not for another 8 days. So you're kind of looking at it going, you've had 2 weeks worth of rest. This was the first game that we've got midweek. We don't then have another game until next week, Thursday. I don't really understand where he was going with that lineup. And if we'd got something out, if we'd got a draw out of it, do you know what? We probably did deserve it on the second half performance. But looking at it overall, City tinkered today, and I think this is the bit that everyone's kind of missing. I wish City had most of the ball, because if they had most of the ball, we could have caught them on the break. But because they actually, if you notice, they gave us the ball this time round because they knew we had nothing up top to hurt them, and that's the reason why I think the result was what it was. And you're right about the Solanke bit. They knew they obviously watched the Ipswich game. And so Tel's not great in the middle. Unfortunately, it is what it is, but that's all we've got. Odegaard, okay, we had to see him. This was the first time we got to see him. It is what it is. And Brendan Johnson is Brendan Johnson. We all know what we're going to get out of it. And we saw exactly, when he comes up against good players and good teams and he's not scoring, what is he doing? So I just want to go on that. But I just don't get the Spence bit. I think he has to go with his best. And you can see in those first 10 minutes, that defense was all over the place. They were all over the place. And that is because they've had a consistent run with Spence in that team. They took one man out. And especially with Archie Gray being there, I thought it was do you know what? I was going to come on today, right? And I'm going to say, I messaged Ricky and I was like, I've got an Archie Gray agenda. And I really thought I was going to be on it today. But actually, he played really well. And I can't fault nothing against him because I thought he was going to have a lot of trouble with Haaland today. But I thought him and Danso actually played really well together. I think our problems came from the wing backs. And that was where the biggest issue, especially in that first half, where it came from. Doku up against Porro. We are so lucky that they just did not finish their chances. Another day, it could have been 4 or 5 before halftime, and it would have been a really terrible mistake. But we got away with one. That's how I'm putting it today. We actually got away with one.
Marlon, you leave Archie Gray alone. Leave Archie Gray alone.
No, I'm not having him at centre back. I really can't. I saw it. Look, you saw Liam Delap rip him twice, and we could have been 2-0 down on Saturday. So it's kind of with Archie Gray. I kind of go, I want to see him learning now. He's got to be pushing forward and being able to defend properly now, but he's still not getting that wrong. Where I think he is good is when he gets on the ball, and you saw him spray that pass to Odegaard. And I thought, that's the Archie Gray. And then on Saturday as well, when he laid the ball to Son, it's his defensive side I get really worried about at the moment. And that's the bit where if we are up against it, he does cost us quite a few goals. But people are so blinded about what he does on the ball, they don't see the defensive lapse he has. And this is why Danso is getting a lot of credit, because he's actually making up for the mistakes that Archie Gray is when he's not in the right positions. But I'm not sitting there saying that Archie Gray was crap today. I'm just sitting there saying, this is what I've noticed over the last few games, especially when he plays centre-back. But it is what it is. We ain't got nothing else. I'm just going to go with it.
I think it's tricky, I've been such a big fan of Archie Gray throughout the season. I think we're playing a player that's been inevitably being played out of position throughout the whole campaign. We're yet to see the player in the one position that we understand he prefers to play, which is a defensive midfielder. Are we going to see him in that aspect of a defensive mid, a number 6, whatever you want to call it? We'll wait and see. What it does mean in terms of the table, where it does leave Spurs at the moment. Spurs have dropped down a place from 12th to 13th. Crystal Palace have overtaken Tottenham in terms of the table. And I think we are now level on points with Manchester United. I think reality is now, if you look at that Premier League table for our listeners on audio, Spurs, they're already 8-9 points off mid-table now. Aston Villa in 10th. So it does feel like everything now is really turning focus and attention towards, of course, that Europa League round of 16, where we know we've got AZ Alkmaar a week to come, which does feel like, for many fans out there, one of the 2 biggest games of Spurs' season, and where Ange Postecoglou has the chance to deliver a trophy to Spurs, where if he was to do that, he would be Spurs' most successful manager in the last 17, 18 years. There'd be no doubt about that. Ange Postecoglou has been speaking to the press on the back of that defeat to Manchester City, in which Ange has said from his perspective that he was overall pleased with the performance, but it's disappointing to lose again. And that is the main feeling. We did look more like us from that aspect. He said, from my perspective, we were really relentless. We played aggressive football. We took it to a very good opponent. We never tapered off at all. If anything, bringing the guys on made us stronger towards the end of the game. Disappointing to lose, but I think you see the benefit of us being refreshed and going into a game well prepared. That level of performance in the second half, if we can begin to get that consistently, then we'll be able to really significantly push on. So Ange, overall, fairly happy with the performance. Miles, to stick with you. Look, I think we're all of the understanding now that wherever you think about Ange Postecoglou, he is going to be here until the end of the season. For Tottenham, that is 14 defeats in the Premier League so far this season. Only the bottom four have had more. And I do really feel for the home fans, 7 home defeats in 14 Premier League games. It's so tricky for the fans to take. And again, this show is always about the fans for me. And when you've got fans that are paying some of those highest season ticket prices in the country, it's a bit of pill to swallow, isn't it? When you're losing 7 out of 14 Premier League home games, Miles? Half?
Yeah, it is. But I tend to find that the season ticket holders have been a bit, because of all the injuries and everything that's been happening, I feel like they've been a bit, they haven't really gone at Ange about it. They kind of see the problems he's had to face, and they're looking at the board going, well, especially in January, when it came to January, and they basically left him hanging out to dry. I think everyone can clearly see they didn't back him in the summer transfer window, and they clearly didn't properly back him in the winter transfer window, where Danso, when he came in, we needed him a month ago. This is the reality. And yes, we've lost 14 games. Yeah, look, the season's not good enough. We fully well know that. But I think a lot of people will just take a step back and go, that November, December, and January was hard. It was a game every 3 days. It's hard to take. And some of the performances weren't great. And even look, I was here criticizing them for some of them, but I can see the problems he had. My only issue is with Ange is that if he goes into next season and he gets the same injuries, I don't believe he's the man to take us through that period, because he's clearly shown for 2 seasons he can only rely on his starting 11. So that's why today again was quite, even though he rotated, even though I'm going on about Spence, the Kulu and something I completely understood it, because they've probably been playing every 3 days for the last 2 months. They needed a rest. And it got to a point where I was thinking, when they come on, I think Dal said it, where they're tired and it's a case of we'll have the fresher legs. And it looked like that in the second half. You could clearly see from the chances we created. And I know a lot of people are sitting there going, we deserve something from today's game. The first half, Manchester City fans are probably sitting there going, well, we should have had this game out of sight. So you have to see it from 2 perspectives here. But at the end of the day, losing, going back to your original question, losing this amount of games is not good in any season, no matter how many injuries you've got. We've clearly got something to sort out for next season. And what if they are going to stick with Ange next season? Because we don't know. We still don't know. They clearly need to make sure he has a squad next season. And it's got to be a mix of both youth and young, what they're doing.
Yep.
But a mix of experience and a mix of players. Look at their injury record. Just look. Before you sign any of them, just to see how they've been going over the last few years. Have they had hamstrings? Have they had any injuries that, forget Vicario and Solanke, because they happen. But with everyone else, for the injuries that we've been having, you can do your research on these players. We will do it. We can clearly go and see it. If we could clearly see that Van der Ven had an injury problem. So you have to know which player's going to suit the system now. We're 2 years into this. Come on. Know your manager. Know the sort of players he needs.
Well, just on the squad and the manager, I've got to ask you, T. Pep Guardiola's been out in his post-match presser and said this is one of the best depth of squads from Tottenham I've ever seen. The manager, Ange Postecoglou, he's exceptional. Dejan Kulusevski, Heung-Min Son, Jed Spence, all on the bench. When they come on with their impact, these are all fantastic players. They're brilliant. They're a fantastic football team. What do you take away from those words there from Pep Guardiola?
We had a little chat before coming on air about Pep and his relationship with the British press. Fair to say he's not the biggest fan, but fair to say he's been in the country for a very long time. He's obviously been in the game for a very long time, both as a player and a manager at the very highest level, arguably the greatest that to ever have done it. And so I don't really care what he says about our team. He's got nothing to do with our club. And I think he's just stoking the fire and kind of having a bit of a prod at the press. And I don't think he's having a prod at us. That's all for him. So I'm not particularly interested in what he has to say. But regarding our team this evening, Rick, again, you and I were talking before the show. That's the second youngest team Tottenham Hotspur has ever fielded in the Premier League, ever. So let that sink in. The average age of our players today was 23 years, 243 days. 23. That was the average age of our players today. So yes, we're still in a rebuild, and I know it's tedious, and with all of those losses, do those losses not hurt me and bring me down and destroy a weekend or a midweek Wednesday like they do for every other Tottenham fan? Some more than others, but the fact remains we were decimated by injuries in crucial positions, and that is going to upset any manager and any team. It just is what it is, guys. And I know it's tedious to keep banging on about it, but unfortunately, we have to sip from the poison chalice to a degree this season. Darren said it. You said it, Rick. Marlon knows it. We all know it. This season, Premier League is cooked. That's it. So with regards to the Spence argument, and again, I think we probably know it. It's just hard for us to kind of look at it and go, well, he probably was rested, because why we start Bergvall and don't start Spence is that I would argue, and Bergvall was magnificent again today, but he's nowhere near as crucial as Spence. Jed Spence is arguably our most important player right now. So if he does need to be, cliche alert, wrapped up in cotton wool, then so be it. And I know that the next game is eight days away, but look at how luck or fortune has treated us thus far this season. Any little knock from him, anything, the most innocuous looking touch, and if he's out, we're toast. And so I want to win every football game. I was okay losing that today in the Premier League. Sorry to say it, Spurs fans. I was okay with that.
It's interesting. I've got my good friend Anthony Costa texting me right now, and unfortunately I can't read out what he's saying because it wouldn't be broadcastable on air. But it's fair to say,
what a surprise!
I mean, look, now coming over to you. You, like me, have suffered being a Spurs fan for many years, to the point now where you are stopped in the street and, quite frankly, asked your views on a pretty day-to-day basis where you are with Tottenham. Look, I think it has been a really tricky season. I think it's fair to say that. I've said on numerous times that I'm looking forward already. It sounds awful saying it. I'm looking forward to coming towards the end of it, where fingers crossed we do win a trophy, because it has been a really, really tricky season. And I think when you're seeing, normally on a Wednesday night, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, under the lights, there'd normally be a real big atmosphere. At home to Man City aside, that, let's be honest about it, in the past, they have been a bit of a bogey team. In terms of, for them, they found Spurs being a bogey team. And the reality is, like I said, I made that point there. This is only the second time in their 6th Premier League visit they've come to Spurs and won, but they have done it in back-to-back seasons. And the reality of it is being that when we've had this record at home where it's 7 defeats in total, when it's 5 wins and 2 draws, it's 50% losses in the stadium. I mean, you can understand why, probably to some degree, Dow, it's really hard to kind of generate that atmosphere. Is that fair to say that at the moment when you look at our form there? And we know there's been a decimation of injuries, just to be clear. It's really hard, I think, when you look at the last 3 months, you have to put that in some context where we understand there's been a problem with the injuries, but I'm just talking solely on the stadium, being at home and the home record. I think it's really hard to try and generate an atmosphere, and results haven't been that great there domestic-wise. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely fair. As I said earlier, I totally appreciate fans paying their hard-earned money. And I said on a previous pod that football is meant to be our fun as fans. We go there because that's our escape from our work, our lives, whatever it is that we are coming away from. We go to football for pleasure. It's our hobby. It's our enjoyment. It's our pastime. It's not our job. So when we're there, we want a good time, and we're spending a lot of money, which we know Daniel Levy has made that the way for us. So we spend a hell of a lot. So you want to be entertained. You want to have a good time. And I can totally hear it from a fan's perspective that it's not fun in the ground right now. It's not the happiest of places right now. Also, there is the atmosphere of Enoch out and that atmosphere. We still have a fan base that is still Ange in, Ange out debate, which we get from Costa and et cetera, et cetera. We are still divided. So I think with that in the stadium, it does make it a challenge for there to be an atmosphere, because there are divided opinions, there are divided views. So that's why this season's a challenge for us as fans as well as for the team, because like Marlon quite rightly spoke about earlier, like looking at a player like Archie Gray, for example, he's been played out of position and he's not been able to play in his favoured position, which is our defensive midfielder. Now, you look at our squad and I can't wait to see him play there. And I think what's excited me this season is looking at it from a footballing aspect rather than just a game-by-game aspect. Watching him learn as a centre-half will only enhance his game as a DM, because he'll understand the job that he's doing for the players behind him. He's been there. He appreciates the work that they're doing for him, and they're going to appreciate the work that he's doing for them. There's a handover that there's an exchange that he's getting, which at that age is phenomenal to receive. And what he's also getting now is he's got Danso arrived, and I didn't know much about him before, and I was like, let's see what you bring. And he's bringing an air of confidence. He's bringing an air of control. He's also bringing leadership. And that's great to have when you're young. As Marlon quite rightly said, Archie Gray will make mistakes because he's not a centre-back. Danso is a centre-back. So his job is trying to clean up and go, if you make a mistake, I've got you. As you're learning, I've got you. I'd ideally like to be playing with Van der Ven or Romero or Davies, but I've got you. So I've got to make this work. And that's what we've done a lot this season. Make it work. Try and make it work. Fit in wrong shaped holes and pegs together, and it's not been the best fit. And we're at that point of the season now where we only have a little bit to salvage. And salvage is potentially winning the Europa, which is going to be a challenge. It's not given. But the other challenge is how we ride out the rest of the season in terms of what we look at our squad. Marlon, you made a point about Ange, and I wanted just to highlight about him only trusting his first 11. Tonight was a night where he's trying to find out if he can trust other people. And that's part of this process till the end of the season. He's working out, can I start Odegaard? Can I give him a game? Also, I don't know what the deal with Tel. Does he look at him and go, I need him, I want him? I know he said it out loud, but that may be the media play. I don't know if you're looking at his squad and going, are you better than Dame Scarlett? Are you better than Lancashire when he comes back? Are you going to give Stanky an issue? Are you pushing if I get rid of Richarlison? These are the questions that we need to start evaluating and answering now, so that as we get to the end of the season, we can look at who we're bringing in and out and be really frugal with our transfer dealings and build the squad right. Pep was being tongue-in-cheek, but there was an element of truth to what he said. We are developing a squad that is very problematic for other people if we get it right. We had a bench today that was seasoned. They were tired, but when they're right, they're seasoned. They're players that all of them can make an impact. All of them can bring something when they're on their game. And that's what we're starting to build. We haven't had that for weeks. Our bench has been babies. Suddenly we had absolute players on there, and also people like Mikey Moore who wasn't there. And that's what we're starting to do. We're starting to build something. So, you know what? I'm not angry at fans being quiet in the stadium right now. I understand it. I get it. And hopefully with what we're talking about today, they can see there's a bigger picture to what Tottenham's doing. And let's see what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say again for our listeners on audio, and that I've been doing Last Word on Spurs for the last 7-8 years, I've got to say that I don't think I've ever seen such a difference of variation in our comments section of the show. And I know, Dal, you've been here for a long time, and Teach as well, and Miles to some degree, that, you know, generally there's normally a 70-80% feeling on how generally the fans are right now. I have to say, you go from one comment to another, and there's such a variation right now in terms of what Spurs fans would want, what would make them happy, who they want to be here, who they don't want to be here, who they would like managing the football club. That I just want to say that I know it's very, very testing right now for everyone to be Spurs fans, because, you know, we don't like losing. You know, although we've become accustomed to losing, it doesn't make it any easier to lose games. And I think, again, that kind of represents the fact that when we're losing the games like we have done at home, and when it is 7 out of 14, you can understand, back to Dow's point, why there is that frustration at home, that kind of atmosphere, where I know so many people messaged me and said to me before the game just how many seats there were around and that was spare for the game. This is Tottenham Hotspur. This is a home game. This is one of the best stadiums in the world. But the reality is, we've said on numerous times, and I've said this throughout so many shows, that I think people are probably sick of me saying it, that the reason why I've never, ever put everything to blame on Ange Postecoglou is that Ange is the same victim as what many of the predecessors have been before him. Conte, Mourinho, Nuno, Pochettino, that unless you're willing to give the manager, to a degree, the squad he needs in general to be able to compete, how are these managers going to really be able to succeed at the football club? And it comes to a point where ultimately we've got to make our mind up in terms of what we want to be. And I think this is now a really big summer for the football club, whether we go and win the Europa League, whether we don't go and win the Europa League. I think there needs to be a Brandt Root sit down in terms of what are we looking to be here? Are we looking to be a football club, first and foremost, that is going to be there for the fans that want to win? Or are we just simply an entertainment venue that is hosting Eubank and Ben, which looks like it's going to be a great boxing fight, and that's going to get great numbers, of course, on the back of what we saw, obviously, with that press conference. That will be also scheduled on Thursday for those that are interested in that. You've got numerous concerts going on throughout the summer, so there's no doubt the entertainment side of the business is doing really, really well. But let's be honest about it, we're football fans. All we care about is what's going on the pitch in terms of the footballing side of the business for us. And I think until we understand where that's at, we're going to get more and more questions like this. So look, we're going to squeeze in our first break of the show. For our listeners on audio, I want to say a massive thank you as always for listening, tuning to Last Word on Spurs. I'm joined by actors TJ Ramini, Darren Hartman. It's me and Marlon over there. Me and Marlon. I'm making up the panel here on Last Word on Spurs. Ange Postecoglou has been speaking in his post-match press conference where he's given a bit more detail and depth into his feelings on the back of that Man City result. He just said, look, from his perspective, he thinks first half, we were just a little bit too eager to get the ball forward. I thought we were really wasteful. And when you're like that against City, it allows them to get into a rhythm of a game and they can pick you off at any different time. And we just didn't quite handle the game really well. They scored and a couple of really good opportunities after that. He was asked his thoughts on Wilson Odebear making his first start since the Coventry game, of course, in the Carabao Cup. God, that feels like a long time ago, doesn't that Coventry game? Wilson Odebear, that moment. He said, I thought Wilson was great for us during the game. Him, Destiny and Brennan got some vital minutes in their locker. You could see with Wilson, he hasn't played for quite a period of time. And that for him, it's all about now getting a regular run of games. But I thought, as I've said throughout my recent pressers, he could be a big catalyst for us in the second half of this season. He's an exciting player. And he's one that if we can manage him through this period and get him to a really decent level, I've still got the confidence he can have a really strong finish to the end of the season. Now, Ange was asked about the fact of having Son, Kulusevski and Spence on the bench. And was it a case of it being their turn to have a rest rather than others needing the minutes? And he said, no, it wasn't their turn. But like I said, it's just there's no point having a squad. And I can't be sitting here bemoaning not having a squad and then not to use it when I do. I think there needs to be an element where I'm being highly hypocritical of me because we needed Destiny, Brennan and Wilson to play in this game. Decky, Sonny and Jed, played an enormous amount of game time. So having them have a little bit of recovery and a breather, I thought was going to be very, very helpful for us. But more importantly, I've now got 3 more players who are going to get closer to what I mean and I need us to do. That means what I mean by that 90 minutes for Brennan, and it's the first 90 minutes in a while, of course, for Wilson as well. We're going to have some real options, which we're going to need because we've got Europa and League back-to-back now. I mean, as many bodies as available. And was also asked, is it too simplistic to say City had Haaland, you didn't have Solanke, and if you had Solanke, the result could have been a different outcome? He said, look, absolutely, Dom and Richie are 2 really important players for us. And look, let's also not get away from it. Matisse is working really hard at the moment and doing a big job for us that I think does go unnoticed. It will be good to get Dom back. When he was playing there for us, he was hard to stop. And you can see the benefit of City having Erling in their side. So hopefully Dom isn't too far away at all. And just to bring that news on Dominic Solanke, if you haven't heard beforehand, Ange Postecoglou is hoping Dominic Solanke will, fingers crossed, be available. We're hoping for potentially that first leg of the AZ Alkmaar tie. So listen, we'll keep an eye on that with regards to Dominic Solanke's progression. Ange was asked about Heung-Min Son towards the end of that game, who took the touch away from Sarr. He said, look, I didn't really see it happen so quickly, but I'll be honest with you, look, I'm flattened by the defeat. But in terms of the way we play and the way we went about it, it was much more the team that I want us to be. And we've already shown that we can be the team we want to be. So there's a real lesson for us here. So yeah, those were Andy's words after that presser. And like I said at the moment, I think no one takes losing well. And Ange Postecoglou, I think, as you know, in some of these post-match pressers, doesn't take losing quite well. I will come on to that team lineup in full just to give everybody a breakdown of that. So obviously, Ange, the headline news was that he did rest a number of the more experienced players in the team. We do continue to be without, just to be clear, Romero, Mickey van der Ven, Dominic Solanke, Richarlison, Ben Davies for the game. Everybody else was back in contention following that 4-1 victory at Ipswich. We did rest Porro, James Maddison, who both returned, while Destiny Udogie, Brennan Johnson, who scored twice at Portman Road, retained their spots in the team. It is the 4th game in a row where the starting midfield has been Bentancur, Bergvall, and either Maddison or Kulusevski, which is quite interesting because it does feel at the moment that Basuma and Sarr, to this degree now, you'd probably say are really much seen as bench options because we're not seeing these guys feature in the first team in this last month or so. As we mentioned, Odobert started for the first time since that Carabao Cup game at Coventry. Spence, Kulusevski and Son all on the bench. So some big names rested. Werner also back on the bench too and did come on. So that Spurs team read Vicario, Porro, Gray, Danso, Udogie, Bergvall, Bentancur, Maddison, Johnson, Tel, Odobert, Kinski, Reguilon, Spence, Basuma, Sarr, Kulusevski, Werner, Son, Scarlett making up the bench. I mean, look, I think I've already covered the lineup in general, Dow, about the feeling about Spence not starting. Dow, anything more to add on that? I mean, look, I think everyone at the moment is loving Jed Spence. I mean, that's obviously very, very clear. Everyone's loving Jed Spence. And I think I'd be foolish to not point this out, that Spence has only started 13 games this season. And look, I think it's also fair me suggesting that if Jed Spence goes and gets injured, then Ange Postecoglou is then labelled an injury wrecker through not resting Spence. So is that a situation where you feel he can't win to some degree? You wanted to rest some players, you got some players back, or was there an extreme rotation that didn't need to be required? Because I know many fans are suggesting, could you not have started some of these players and brought them off if the game was going to plan?
It's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah,
I honestly mean that. It's half and half. Everyone's opinion can be validated. You start someone, you take him off. That's the better way to do it. Try and get a goal, nick a goal early. Then my theory of going, you play the tired legs against tired legs. Different idea. And maybe going, I want to test out these players. We bought Odobert because he meant to be a first team player. He's not bought for the bench. Trying to get Brennan Johnson back. So there's a number of different ways it could flip flop either way. I just want to do a little Spence conversation, a tiny little one. I know he's in the side now and everyone's excited. He's playing well and I'm glad to see it. There was a lot of talk when he came into the side, a lot of Spurs fans having a go at Ange for not playing him before, blocking him from the team, not giving him time. Just so we're nice and clear, from what I know, and I can say this with confidence, Spence was his own worst enemy. Spence lives his life and plays football, and his attitude towards football needed addressing. And I know people close to him who were concerned that he wasn't going to focus when he got to Tottenham because he likes a certain style of life and he gets occupied with other things and his head can be taken out of the game. Ange has got him back and got him focused. And he looks like a great player. Anyone who wants to challenge that and go, Ange is the problem, just do your research and look at what Neil Warnock was saying about him when he had him. A lot of big managers have looked at him and gone, he's a great player, but his head isn't always there. And he's not always focused. Now we've got him focused. So Ange may be going, I've got to play the game with him a little bit. I can't play him every game. I don't want to burn him out. I don't want him to feel that he's indispensable. I don't want to grow his attitude where I'm trying to control something here. Because again, he's young. As TJ highlighted, our squad and our first team, they were babies today. And we've got to give them a bit of care and a bit of love. Like when Marlon was talking about Archie Gray, I was like, look after him, leave my Gray alone. Because we've also got to be aware as fans, we've got to look after these players right now. If we want next season to see them flourish. And we've got an abundance of young players that could be great. If one, they're managed well. If two, we support them as fans. We can't throw them under the bus quickly. And also, we can't put our whole season on our left back, stroke right back. You know what I mean? He can't carry this by himself. This is a team effort. So when people are uproar when he plays, he doesn't. It's a team effort. Come on, let's balance it out a little bit. You know what I mean?
No, I hear that.
Can I just go back on the Spence bit?
Of course you can.
The reason why I don't agree with half of that was because he left him out of the Europa League squad and he's only in the team because of injuries. There's no other reason why he's playing.
No,
And to
Marlon,
say
that's
no,
that's what I'm saying.
but
Though.
it's not. But you're saying keeping him focused, and I get all that. But if he had played him back when he got the man of the match against Coventry and he saved his job, he may have been focused a lot earlier. He had a great preseason, and we were all going on about it. He then left him at the Europa League squad, which you can't sit there and say, he left Reguilon out too. At the end of the day, if Spence doesn't come back into this team because of injuries, we don't see this. We don't see this at all. It's only injuries why Spence is back in this team. No other reason. And Spence took his chance. His attitude was probably still there when he came back into this team. All it took was actually seeing what he could do at Spurs and actually being focused. Because yes, I get what Warnock said. I get it. But no one ever quotes, Steve Cooper, who had him playing really well. So it's, you can't, I get what people are saying, but Spence, at the end of the day, Spence is only in this team for the last month, has been one of our best players. And I get that you guys go, he might have got injured today, but he might get injured against Alkmaar. We don't know. This is the nature of football. But to leave our best player of the last month against the Manchester City, this is not Ipswich. This is Manchester City, and everyone's disappointed with today. And it's not like Ricky said, he's only played 13 games. He's one of the guys that probably doesn't need a rest. I agreed with it with the Kulu. I agreed with the Sun. But when it comes to Spence, if he's one of the best players, he didn't need to drop him today. That's my only thing. He just didn't need to drop him. It's not about like the comments he made recently about Spence and saying that he was testing him. I'm sorry, you left him out the Europa League squad. You chose Forster. You can't, we saw it. It was naturally played out. And this is the thing that when people want to use that, Ange basically got to a point where Spence had to play because he didn't have no one else in the squad. And he had to play him. And Spence took his chance. Conte never gave him that chance because he never got to a point where he got these injuries. And Ange would have probably got rid of him in the summer if he could have. If an offer came in that we had to accept, he would have got rid of him. And if we didn't get the injuries, he would have probably gone out on loan in January. And this is all becomes irrelevant. So that's why I don't prescribe to the bit about his attitude and what everyone's been saying, because as soon as he started playing, we've seen a complete different Spence. So maybe that's all it was going to take to actually get him to play games and actually feel like a Tottenham Bear, because the first manager that brought him in, and I'm a fan of Conte, didn't even want him. Basically told him didn't even want him. So, the club haven't looked after Spence. And that's the reality of it. The club haven't looked after Spence. They sent him out on loan. They've sent him here, there, and everywhere. So, mentally, he's 24 now. He's not even a kid. He's 24. So if you're going to just ship him out here, left, right, and center, not look after him, yes, of course he's going to have some, he's going to have some, he's going to have some attitude issues because he knows how good he is. And sometimes you need that in a certain player, because if he never had this attitude, he would not be playing like this now. He knew he was good enough to be in this lineup. And that's the only thing where when people start talking about Spence and saying about it, it really gets my back up, just because he was good in pre-season. He showed Ange he was good in pre-season, and Ange still decided not to play him. And that Coventry game, I'll never understand why he didn't think, oh my God, this guy can play, because he literally saved his job.
Just to come back on that, Marlon.
Yeah.
I hear your point in terms of Spence as a footballer. And in terms of his attitude, I quote it because I know the information. Like, I know people who are closer to him. So in terms of what you're saying about his preparation, him being ready to play, he's a footballer. When he's on the pitch, he's a footballer. But unfortunately, what he's had to deal with is with Conte. Conte has rules, and he's a taskmaster, and he works in a certain way. And if you don't toe his line, he lets you know about it. And that's Conte. And certain players won't work with that, and it won't work for them. And that's just Conte. What we're finding now is that now he's playing, everyone is so happy that he's there, but he's going, Ange didn't play him because Ange is an idiot or Ange is foolish. There's more behind that. And I think sometimes as fans, we only get part of an equation, and we make all of our opinion off part. And that is part of football. We have to go with our gut and our impulses and the little bit of information we have. What I wanted to do is to go, there's more to Spence than what everyone knows. And it's not just, oh, he's X, Y, or Z, he's a great player, or he's just a little bit lackadaisical, whatever. There is a player who, when he's away from the game, isn't always focused. And you've got to set a precedent for everybody. If you're late, there's discipline. If your attitude is not right, there's discipline. There's certain things that, as a manager, you set your bar. And at times, Spence weren't meeting it. So that's why he wasn't inside. And sometimes that would have been to Ange's detriment, because he may have wanted to play him, watching him going, you're so good, but you're not doing X, Y, and Z, so I can't play you. You're tying my hands. And then, like we said, injuries and stuff happen where he's suddenly gone, I have no one, I have to play you. I'm putting all my faith in you. Don't disappoint me. Don't let me down. And he hasn't, because as you've never heard Spence talk badly about Ange. You've never heard him come out and go, I don't like him, I dislike him, or X, Y, or Z. They're building a relationship which will benefit us going forward. But my point was just to go, we can't just go, Ange is an idiot for not playing him, and that, oh, now he's got him, great, let's wrap this guy in cotton wool and look after him because he's our saviour. There's a lot of other players in that same boat, and I don't want to put it all on one. And I'm glad to see him playing. I'm happy he's in the squad, and I hope that we can keep him like this, because when he's there, he looks great.
I think, Caesar, it's the main, crux when you're looking at the nature of the selection that's got a lot of fans back up by the fact that Jed has only, as I mentioned, started 13 games over the course of the season. I think, as we've said, there's definitely a case why you want to rest maybe Sonny, Kulusevski ahead of a big European game. Can you understand that frustration from some fans out there, why Spence maybe would need to have been rested, especially when you look at the display from Pedro Porro, where we'll come on to it shortly? Was a bit of a heather and heavyweight display from Porro at times. And Spence, I think, is really, whether it's by, as we've touched upon there, through Dow and through Marlon, whether it's by playing his way into the team, whether it's by getting an opportunity, as what Ange Postecoglou has said, that reality is Spencer's now cementing himself as a first-team player. And that's why I think a lot of fans being at home to Manchester City, a massive, massive game, whatever you think about it, maybe take out the context of where Spurs are in the league and the fact we do know Europa League for some fans out there is priority, but for those paying Tottenham fans that go and watch their team week in, week out at home, that again, I'll make that point out there, because again, I feel like I've got a duty to do this to those Spurs fans out there that listen and watch this show and pay some of the highest ticket prices in Europe to go and watch this team at home. They're going to want to see some of the most informed, best players that there are right now. Jed Spence is one of those players, T. So can you understand the fact of him not starting when he's only had 13 starts so far this season?
Of course, and I understand all of it. I understand every side of every debate. And I think that that's something that, again, I think certainly the panelists on the show today also subscribe, to that same theory, that whether we agree or whether we disagree, we can always understand the perspective of somebody else, because we're all Tottenham fans. Same with you, Rick. Yes, you run the show and you're the host of the show and you created this fantastic product. But number one, you're a Tottenham Hotspur fan. And so are the viewers and the listeners. And so, if we've got this electrifying, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, lovely chap. And his last name is Spence. He's called Stephen Spence. And he's not a football guy. He's an American friend of mine. And I sent him a picture of Spence, sliding on his knees with Spence on his back. And I put cheeky Tottenham purchase, exclamation mark. And he was laughing and all this sort of stuff. And I was talking to him about Spence. And I said, he's arguably one of the most talked about players in the country right now. Of course, Salah's still grabbing the headlines. People are talking about Trent. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? There's always other players in the headlines. But as far as not just Tottenham, but we're talking about England now, this whole debate, is Spence undroppable for England? And he hasn't even started his England career yet. So when I see him left off the team sheet, of course, I'm going to have a little bit of a whinge or, perhaps, be a little crestfallen. But then I'm also saying genuinely, and this is no disrespect to the fans who pay their money. Listen, every single home game, it's either two of my best friends or one of my best friends and my brother who are at that game. And so, I understand. And whenever I come home, I'm there, so I understand. And the fact that we pay such high ticket prices, that's nothing to do with the players or the manager. We know where responsibility for that lies. That's a whole other debate that we've had numerous times over the course of this season. And so, yes, I want to see us field our strongest team for every game. But I also want us to perhaps be, I don't think actually pragmatic is a strong enough word. I will say, I think Ange was risk averse today. And I personally don't have a huge issue with him doing that. No, I don't think this game was a free swing, but it was an opportunity, like Darren said. Let's see how good Wilson Odebear is now that he's actually fully fit. Let's see how he is. Let's play Tel up the middle again. Let's see what he can do. Let's put Maddison in and see if he can make a difference. Is Brennan Johnson fully fit yet? Nice for him to have the luxury to do so. Same with Udogie. Udogie's been out for a very long time. As a young man with high hopes and a very high ceiling. Let's bring him in. I mean, listen, if you were going to rest anyone, you should have rested Porro, but he didn't do that. I'm not prepared to kind of, be terribly upset about that, because my focus is Europe right now. Do I ever want to lose a football game? No, of course not. I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan. But if I were to be a little bit more risk averse, and if it was up to me, I also would have perhaps said, you know what, let's give these guys a really good go, but my focus is next week. Just my opinion. Love and respect to all.
Of course. I think one thing we just need to really, again, put out there, I think hopefully at some point, one of the great journos, whether it's Ali, whether it's Dan Kilpatrick, whether it's George Sessions, whether it's Jay, whether it's Jack Pitbrook. I hate doing this, and I end up leaving a journalist out. I feel awful for leaving one of the journos out there on the circuit. I mean, Ange did kind of remark a kind of phrase to suggest that when Udogie's back, Spence might be behind him. So I think at some point it would be it'd be great to get some clarity on that. I mean, look, I'm sure Ange would suggest that nobody's got a God-given right to a first-team place, but I know there's some fans out of that felt that as soon as the opportunity was there, where you were presented with Udogie and Porro available, there was maybe a gut feeling that, whether it was rightly or wrongly, Spence would drop back to the bench, and that seems to what's happened. Is it by the fact that we've got, in the next 7-8 days' time, a massive, massive, massive European game for the football club? That's another question. But look, I think the reality is, I think we can all sit here and say that if next week Tottenham go and get a result at AZ Alkmaar, then I think to some degree, we won't feel as bad as what we might feel losing to Manchester City. And we don't want to lose any game. Look, we'll come on to some of the aspects of that game itself and how it played out. I think we've touched on the fact that City did start the game really, really well, and Spurs really struggled to get to grips of it. And City, of course, did score from very much kind of the early part of that game. It was 9-10 minutes in, where there was a flowing counter involving Savinho, Haaland, Nico Gonzalez, Doku, who crossed to Haaland. It took a deflection off Brennan Johnson, and there was Haaland to score and stroke home his 20th league goal of the season. I mean, look, Dale, coming to you, it was far too easy, wasn't it? The move itself, how it came about. Doku's given far too much room to pick out the Haaland, who clipped it past Vicario. And I think, as we've said numerous times, Dale, defensively, this wasn't the greatest of showing from Tottenham, because we have seen several images that show similar things in the past, where you've got 7, 8, 9 men around a forward and an area stroking one in, Dale.
Yeah, it was a day where what was being implemented in terms of system was very much going back to, as it's been called, Ange ball. So there was a lot of trying to high press early, to pressing groups, which wasn't happening. The front three, to be fair, did not do themselves any justice today in their first half performance, because that's where a lot of the issues started, because they didn't press well enough. One would go, one wouldn't follow. They'd go in twos rather than threes. So the passing moves were flowing through. And then Doku, he had Pedro's number. He had it. He had his number for the whole night. He knew that he was on a win that end. And I know people spoke about Brennan Johnson and Porro being together and what they bring when we're attacking. But what you find is when we're defending, it's sometimes a big problem, because Brennan doesn't always give the support to Pedro as he needs to. And I think that's something that we need to address. When he's got Spence there, Spence does a lot of the work for him. And Spence is one of those players that he covers backward and forwards. So today, Doku literally, he did this all night, you saw. And in the middle, you had a centre midfielder and a centre half. So the communication there was a little bit off. They weren't called properly. I know he was over Danzo's shoulder, and Udogie hadn't got close enough. And you can't leave Haaland free in the centre of your box. He's going to score. Simple as that.
And that is what he did. I mean, coming over to you, if I can, Miles, Danso pushed high up the pitch to tackle Marmouche. He missed out, and then a huge amount of ground to recover. I think, look, Danso, to be fair, I think he's been one of Spurs' most consistent players really since coming through the door. But I think the frustration will be, it's just the way that Man City really worked that ball out wide. The Doku was touched upon. and Haaland is completely free in the middle. To be fair to Dan, I thought he did really well to get back in the box and when he was out of position. But you've got a Dogi also ball watching whilst Haaland's, walking into the box right in front of him. I mean, Miles, how many times have we discussed a goal of this nature? It feels far too many times on the show this season.
Typical Ange Ball and our fullbacks, and this is why the whole argument comes with Doku, because with Pedro Porro. And I think actually to agree with Dal, I've been saying Brennan Johnson and Pedro Porro can't play together. He needs to stop that partnership because Brennan Johnson doesn't help enough out as much as what Son and Werner and all them guys on the left do for Udogie. And even when Spence is there, they help him out. But you can see when against Ipswich on Saturday, Spence, because he's probably a better defender than Pedro Porro, when Brennan Johnson ain't covering it, you don't really see it. So tonight, that's why I'm looking at going, and you saw what happened over the weekend. You really thought this was the best option tonight, and that's the team you went with. And that's at the end, and that's why you got to the bit where Haaland is left alone in the middle, because Danso obviously thinks Mamouche is the threat. He comes out, which then they play it out. I think he then plays it out to Doku at the time, and Doku's just got the freedom. Pedro, like for me, Archie Gray or Porro, they need to talk. One of them needs to talk to each other, see the danger, and go just get out to him. Because if you give him the room like as he does, Haaland does what he does best. He's just going to get into that box and sweep in. And, you can't give him the freedom for Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. This is Haaland, who's probably on record to break Alan Shearer's record. And if Kane comes back, to probably beat Kane as well. So it's a silly thing. It happened, but we move on kind of scenario.
Yeah.
Interesting as well, Miles, to that point and to Darren's point. I don't know if you guys watched the Liverpool game. No, obviously Haaland was missing for that game. But if you look, Doku, who doesn't he have the beating of is one question, but this isn't a Manchester City podcast. I just think he's an exceptional player. I like him very much, but
wish it was like a Man City podcast.
But arguably the best player potentially in the world at the moment, Mo Salah had no problem, busting a gut and the amount of support that he gave to Trent in that game. Every single time Doku was on the ball, Salah made sure that he went back and doubled that guy. And then you have Konate and Van Dijk, again, exceptional players, positionally so strong. They just have the reading of the game. They've just got it down. And so actually, when I was watching it, there were a lot of people criticizing Doku's final ball. And every now and again, you just have to tip your hat to the defenders and just going, listen, I beat my man every single time. Whether it was going to the byline and using my left foot or going outside and using my right foot and put a ball into the box. But there was Konate, there was Van Dijk. If it bounces off, there was Salah, there was Trent. And so you're right that Johnson doesn't do that enough. And to be honest, he's young and fit enough to be able to provide that. So for me, again, that's just a decision that he has to make to work harder, because I know it's not glamorous or perhaps it's not going to get you many minutes on Match of the Day. I mean, heavens knows you're a Tottenham Hotspur fan. You're not Tottenham Hotspur player. You're not going to get a lot of minutes on that program anyway. But
not this season.
No, exactly. But do more of that. It's that whole idea of when you're brought off, whether you're brought off at the 90th minute or at the 60th minute, should be hobbling off because you've given absolutely every inch, every millimeter, every fiber of your being, and then you pour yourself into an ice bath and wait to go again.
Can I ask, Dal, coming over to you, because you are one of the more, I hope my mum is sad, it's one of the more optimistic, positive contributors that we have on this show. We need to have a conversation about Pedro Porro, I think. Obviously, look, Doku was constantly tormenting Porro in that first half, as we've touched upon. He breezed past him a couple of occasions. We had Savinho. Savinho, I'm not sure how he didn't score. He had a sitter that he missed, that should have put City 2 up. I mean, I asked this question actually, I think, in the green room to you guys, and it felt like there's this kind of general feeling that every time Doku went forward, he had Porro's number. I mean, what's your gut feeling for you in it, Dal? Do you think that Porro will eventually have to be moved further forward? Because we've discussed the fact that with Spence at the moment, despite the fact that he wasn't playing this game, and there's a general feeling, I think, with Spurs fans that Spence is undroppable at the moment, given his current form. Where does that leave Pedro Porro's position for you in the team, in the squad? Can he still do a really good job as a fully functioning right back in some games, or do you think he might be better suited further up the pitch? Because I think defensively at the moment, there's that real feeling, I think, amongst a lot of fans that defensive side is really lacking. And it's frustrating because we can see the ability of the player on certain one-off games, but we can't get away from the fact that there's been too many occasions where players have got in behind him. I mean, where do you stand on that debate for you, Dale?
I think it's been highlighted a lot this season because also he's not had Van der Ven and Romero there to bail him out. Like TJ quite rightly spoke about Liverpool having Konate, having Van Dijk there. When you've got centre-halves of that calibre, if you're fullback and make a mistake, they can make you look. They can save the day. I think with Pedro, I believe that if we're going forward the way it looks like we're going forward, Spence would be first choice right back. Hopefully that means Pedro doesn't play every game. Then you can pick and choose where you use Pedro, because there's going to be certain games where you don't have a Doku and you have a left winger that isn't that great. And you may want to play a more expansive game where you want your fullback to be living in the opposition's half, putting pressure on there and staying up there. And Pedro's great for that. He's great when he's given that license. I don't know if he's the great transition to be a right winger, because I just don't know, because sometimes he's wasteful and not all of his crosses land when you want him to go. Sometimes he takes shots when there's a pass on and he could just trigger happy and shoot every 2 minutes. So I don't know. I feel that he's a good backup right now. If I was him, if I'm Pedro, I'd be worried about my Tottenham career, because I'll be looking at Spence going, boy, you look like a player and you're going to be first choice. I had my moment. Tim Sherwood said I couldn't defend. I proved that I could play a bit. Now I'm stuck in this place where I could be sold. And I think that's where he's at right now.
Is that how far you go, Dale? And you really feel that, yeah? You're quite... Yeah. I'm surprised you said that. I'm really surprised.
Would it not be a case, Darren, of like, we want to be, like Rick said maybe 10, 15 minutes ago, we want to show that we're a serious club. So I always look at, the other... no disrespect to the smaller clubs, but I look at the other big clubs and I look at their benches and I'm like, wow. So would it not be a case of Tottenham, taking that next step up, the players acknowledging that, and a player like Porro thinking, I might not be first choice because my goodness, this boy is, he's just a sensation. However, I'd like to stay, fight for my place, be used in the cup games and try to bring trophies to a club. Again, this season, I mean, listen, the Premier League proves time and time again, you really need a very deep, very strong squad if you want to compete for the title, but also if you want to win cups. It's just so hard in this country.
For competition, you've got to have depth.
Yeah, man. So, would he be thinking, I think I'm going to get sold, or would he be thinking I might get dropped, but, we're a bigger, stronger side now and I want to stay? Curious what you think.
What do you reckon, Miles? You coming on that point? What do you reckon?
Look, do you know what? The Porro argument, this is the issue. There's the one issue right now, because if you look at the beginning of the season, no one was having this argument about Porro because he had Romero backing him up.
Right.
Yep.
The problem you've got in the last couple of months is he's had Dragushin, Archie Gray, and Brennan Johnson helping him out, and he's not the best at defending when anyway. Go give him an established centre back like Danso. When Danso came in, we didn't see Porro making these mistakes when Spence was on the other side. So you've got to look at what's behind him and the way the system wants Porro to play. And Porro is such an outlet. Let's go back to Newcastle when he was putting cross after cross after cross. Porro is a good player. He can be a right back, but he can't be. No one can expect miracles out of him when, unfortunately, he's got an 18-year-old learning his trade behind him, and then he's got Brendan Johnson, who all of us in the fan base don't rate as a footballer, but he's good. He's good in the box. Yeah. So he's gonna have trouble, and I think if you.
So would he stay then, Miles? So next season when he does have competent players, well, not competent, that's not fair, but when he does have players who are seasoned centre backs playing in their preferred positions, even if he is ousted by Spence, does he look at Tottenham and go, well, good, I'm glad that somebody has come to this club who's better than me, because perhaps we're now in a position where we can truly challenge for perhaps cups and then maybe a title.
But if Ange had picked Spence for the Europa League squad, and not relying on Archie Gray to play right back over Porro, but because we got the injuries at centre back, he had to put Archie Gray at centre back. we'd have options. You'd be able to rotate him and Spence between Europe and the league. This season, and what I would have done this season, I would have probably put Porro in the Europa League games and brought Spence in a lot earlier, no matter what was happening, and played Spence at right back. But at the time, whatever Ange's reasons behind why he didn't want to play Spence, you got to a point where Porro was playing every single game. And this is why tonight, I think someone said if Porro would have been rested tonight, it would have made more sense because the amount of games he has played this season. And I know Porro's not the best defender, but if Tottenham want to really move forward and be taken seriously as a club, you need both Porro and Spence in this squad, and Ange needs to be able to rotate them in a way where there's enough games in a season for them to play a good 30 games between them. And
that's very fair, mate. That's very. I mean, I was, more thinking about next season. I think if Darren was making the point that, if Spence continues to go from strength to strength, and I don't see a ceiling for this boy.
Of course. But Spence, we can't play Spence every game either.
Would Porro think, I'm going to have to leave, or I might get sold? Or does he think, okay, great, the team is improving, we're stronger?
Ange will need to sit down with both of them and go,
right,
look,
this is what I'm going to do.
If we're say we are in Europe next season, let's put this perspective if we're in Europe next season.
Boys, I've got to tell you, I can't even think about next season now. I just want to get to this when I'm on holiday, boys. I can't think about next season. Let me at the end. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I love you all out there. I can't lie. I'm looking forward to holiday. I promise you, whatever happens.
To all of you on audio and actually those on video right now, Ricky does actually have his Speedos on. He's ready for his holiday. You can't see
I was ready for those first 10 games, I think, of the first start of last season to have the holiday. Look, it's, what can you say? There is going to be a decision made there with regards to Porro and what we're going to do with him, because I just think, because we've seen it so often, such a point we've said there about Porro defensively, there will be those concerns as Dal raised, whether we're going to get the best out of the player in that position, and why there might be a feeling that, already as his time comes to an end at Tottenham, but there also might be a feeling, as you said there, Tej, that if you're looking to build a squad that's going to fight on all four fronts, then
champagne problems. I love a few champagne problems.
You need to keep a player like that, and also maybe develop him. And we've seen it often that where a player starts doesn't mean they're going to finish there. I mean, Gareth Bale started for Tottenham as a left back. He ended up as a left wing forward. So it doesn't mean that where you start in the position is where you would end up being in the future. And look, who knows what the future does hold for Porro. The reality is that, I mean, there's going to have to be an improvement there when it comes to essentially what we're seeing week to week. Because I understand the frustration that he's getting torn apart very, very easily. And we're talking about torn apart in that first half. I think we suggested that point. City could have been 2-3-0 up in that first half. And there was a very good save for Courage to deny Haaland as well. I think the hard thing is, as we've touched upon already, that when you are, again, this is the beauty of having options. This is the beauty of having options now that Ange hasn't had for the last 9-12 weeks, and why, again, there has been some context there, or we've tried to allow some context behind the last 9 to 12 weeks because of the decimation of injuries, that when he has had some options and he's changed it around like he's done for this game, I think what you saw in that first half especially was a real lack of fluency, a real lack of balance in that first half, where, as we said,
distribution to the wings, man, was just appalling. We just couldn't get the ball out to our wide men, and everyone was culpable. The passing to our wide men was just atrocious first half, and that was the difference for me. It was very, very simple. That's why the second half for me was so entirely different.
Yeah, I think also concern the fans is when the second half started, we made no changes. But look, there was an uplift in terms of the second half performance. But I mean, going into halftime, City had a number of chances. I mean, Savinho missed a couple of sitters, Bed's kind of booking. But I think what that game has showed for us as well is that we've got some real devoid in the front three. And look, for me, I think it's far too early at the moment. I don't know what you think, Dow. I mean, Matthias Tel, he's been here for 5 minutes. I'm all for, constructive criticism of a player. But what I'm seeing right now, some criticism saying, send him back to Bayern Munich. I just find that utter madness. The guy's literally just turned up. He's played, 300 minutes plus really at the moment?
19 years old.
19 years old, playing down the middle, adjusting to a new league. Bearing in mind, it sounded like the manager had to make the phone call to get him over here. I mean, now we have a bit more patience, aren't we, than writing him off after 4 or 5 games. And I will admit I'm concerned that his touch has let him down on a number of occasions during that night. But I'm certainly not prepared already to kind of part ways or think this guy's going to be a failure at Tottenham. We're going to give it a few more games, surely, Dal, before we write him off.
Yeah, we can't. Writing him off is crazy in terms of that, because obviously we don't know anything about him yet. My concern with the Tel deal was it came a bit left field, and Ange had to do a lot of work to get him there by the sounds of it. And part of me is like, what is this? Is this someone that wants to improve to go back, or improve to get a big move, or if they come because they want to be here for the long haul? Because right now, when Solanke's back, he doesn't start. We know that. So he then has to lose the minutes that he may have been promised in the deal or whatever. Is he then looked at as a potential to play on the left or the right? Is he a competitor for Johnson? Is he a competitor for Son? So I'm a bit confused on what the setup is, but that's what we're using this loan for. To the end of the season, we will work it out together. Then we see how good he is. He's 19. We've brought back Scarlett as well. That's what I mean.
Yep.
This end of the season, there could be gains for us going forward. Like the conversation we just had is exactly right. What do we do with Pedro Porro? The question you asked, Ricky, is exactly what Ange should be doing now. Going, how are we moving forward? What's my best choice? Do we try him in front of Spence and see what happens? Do we see what that looks like? Is he our Trent Alexander? Is he the one that we go, we know he's not good defensively, but when we play the team a certain way, the asset of his passing is what we rely on. When we need a more defensive-minded game, we put Spence in there and everyone understands what we're doing. These are the questions that we have as fans that, unfortunately, we don't get paid to answer. Ange does.
I wonder if Porro could be taught as well to finish like Johnson finishes.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're a fan of Johnson's or not, the boy knows where the back of the net is. And, you know, I said this the last time I was on the show. If there is an argument that the hardest thing to do in sport is put the ball in the back of the net, well, Johnson certainly has.
Yeah, he does.
He's checked that, hasn't he?
The thing is, you know what it is with Johnson, as we know, that the frustration with Johnson is, for those out there that obviously, of course, are following his player weekly, is that Johnson, as you said, knows where the back of the net is. But it sounds crazy me saying this, because scoring is the most hardest thing to do in the game. But when he's not scoring, what else is he doing? That might sound maybe crazy for me to say that, because, you know, he's putting the ball in the back of the net, which, again, I'll say is the hardest job in football, is scoring goals. But the problem with Johnson is you find that he kind of doesn't really take control of the game. There's no kind of driving with an engine with Johnson. You know, again, he's got a lovely touch in front of goal, as some of the comments are alluding to here, but doesn't really take a game by the scruff of the neck, doesn't really turn a game for you. And that's my biggest concern with Johnson, that when he's not scoring, what is he doing? But again, I'll acknowledge that point, that when he's putting the ball in the back of the net, it's one of the most hardest jobs to do. So, yeah, I mean, these debates now in 2025 with social media fans is difficult, because we all want somebody's head on a plate, is what, as Ange Postecoglou has said. And there's that big a debate as we know under Ange Postecoglou at the moment. The reason why we can't keep having it here every week is because he's here to the end of the season. I think, you know, he's not going to go anywhere, Ange Postecoglou. There's no interim by Tottenham. I mean, newsflash, there's nobody out there, guys. You know, even when we were losing in the manner we were in those 9-12 weeks, there's no alternative out there. I think they've shown their hand now, the board. You know, whether you like it or not, Ange is going to be here to the end of the season. And I think, like I say, for many out there, if he wins the Europa League, God help us, because on that trophy tour or that tour bus, there'll be some that want to throw Ange overboard. But there'll be some that will absolutely be thanking him, because he'll be the most successful Spurs manager in the last 17, 18 years for winning a trophy. But I've got to tell you, I mean, look, we know there's so many questions right now with Spurs that maybe there shouldn't be this many questions in mid-February. We should have maybe more answers than questions. But it does feel like we're entering, as we know, a really, really important period for the football club, where I think, as we've said, we do need to try and come together and get behind the team, as difficult as that is. And when I look at our comment sections of the show, as I said in the earlier part, I don't think I've ever seen such a variety of difference in comments when it comes to the manager, when it comes to certain players. And I hate to say it, I hate seeing infighting from fans as well. That's what really upsets me, because we all do want the same thing. We've just got different viewpoints and different ways of getting there, but we do all want the same thing. I mean, I'll come to you, Miles, just in a second on Tel. It was a really, really tough night from, again, not been easy for Tel, I think it's fair to say. Are we seeing a player, in your opinion, Miles, does he look like a number 9 to you? Because I'll never forget Florian Plettenberg. I know some can't stand Florian Pettenberg for the constant selling of Harry Kane at the time to Bayern. He was absolutely adamant. I remember him saying on deadline day, Tottenham fans, Tel is a number 9. He's a centre forward. Does he look like a number 9 to you, Miles, from what you've seen so far on a Spurs shirt?
Not a Premier League one at that. Look, he's young. He's 19. I'm not going to be here going against Tel. Look, if he scores 4 or 5 goals and gets 2 or 3 assists by the end of the season, it's actually relatively successful because he's not going to play many games. But if you look at the way he is in the Premier League, he's more of an inside forward type of player, and that's why everyone is saying he should be on the left or the right. And you can clearly see from the way he plays, I think he's got pace. You know, he's suited to the left or right. And it's probably like when Timo Werner came across. Timo Werner was known as a centre forward, but who could play left or right, and he technically.
Don't ask me what.
I know we're going to get into him, but
no, we're bloody not.
Yeah, but
Miles,
it's just a case
does he have pace?
Does
he?
He just hasn't used it
if someone did a meme of this season, that would be down. That's me. What Dow's doing there? That's a meme of this season.
Look, he hasn't turned trees over at Bayern, and he hasn't really. He's not really going to turn trees over at us.
Is he quick? I've not seen that. Like, genuine question.
Yeah, because I think what it is, because he's played as a number 9, he hasn't had the chance to have that bit where he's getting in behind the defenders, because every team that we've come up against, unfortunately, have played really deep. And I think Manchester City saw that today. They play really deep because they know we can't break them down. There's no Solanke. They're like, nah, Spurs ain't going to do nothing up top. Let's just sit there. They'll give us the ball.
They look very delicate, didn't they? Our front three. No disrespect to them. They just kind of, I don't want to use the term lightweight, but they just looked a bit fragile, right? Perhaps
lightweight.
Yeah, thank you.
Lightweight. We're missing Dom.
Yeah.
Missing Dom so much.
An assist, right?
We're missing Dom.
But
so
everyone's
much.
got to remember that Tel. Yeah. Everyone's got to remember that Tel is coming into a team that is not doing very well. It's not like he's coming into a team that was promising going forward. It's only really turned in the last few weeks.
It's not Bayern Munich.
It's not Bayern Munich. This is a big learning curve for him, and I think people won't want to give him time because of the fact is, look, I don't want to sit there and pay 50-odd million for him right now. I just don't think he's what we need right now. But in 2 or 3 years' time, I won't be surprised that we're sitting there going, I can't believe we had him at our club. Because I won't be surprised if he goes somewhere else and under a different system and a different manager ends up doing well. But just right now, because he's being played as a number 9, and a Premier League number 9, you've got to be a certain type of player to play that way. And Tel, for me, is not that. And it'd be interesting to know what Ange said to him on the phone when he said, this is my idea for you, because I looked at him and went, he's either going to play right or left. He cannot play up top. And with Solanke just does the job better than anyone else in the squad. And when Richarlison's back, if he ever comes back, he's not going to get in front of Richarlison either. Richarlison's a better number 9 than what Tel is.
Yeah.
You can really useful minutes for him, though, Miles, no?
And that's the thing.
Really useful minutes,
really
because nothing's going to sort of illustrate how different the Premier League is to the Bundesliga, other than in you go, and also, by the way, you're going to lead the front line. Good luck,
But let's take Harry Kane for a prime example. I know Harry Kane is world class, but Harry Kane is smashing it. Goals a game. He wasn't doing that in the Premier League. He was, his numbers were great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dismissing Harry Kane here.
No, sure.
The numbers are completely
different. Oh, bro, I'm with you.
Yeah, and that's
they're no pun intended. Leagues apart. The Premier League is its own thing.
And Haaland's the same. Haaland might be smashing it, but he was getting more numbers in
at Dortmund
than he was in at Dortmund.
Yeah.
So you just have to look at it like that. And that's nothing against the Bundesliga. That's nothing against the Bundesliga. It's a great league. But you just have to look at the Harry Kane is 31 and he's a great player, but goal every game.
Well, on you said about Tel there, I would love to know what Ange on the phone to him. I thought he was under hypnosis when he made that phone call. gut feeling, guys. Just gut feeling on this very, very quickly. A yes or a no. From what you've seen so far, Dal, yes or no? Are we going to trigger that option? Will Tel be a Spurs player next season, yes or no?
On what we've seen, no. But I think they are going to trigger it. As a business, I think they will.
As a business, they will. How many times are we, as a business, this is what we've come to now.
Yeah.
Teach, as a football club, should we be triggering this option so far?
What a smart tangent.
That is what we are, aren't we? Are we a football club?
Apparently.
We are apparently trying to be. Well, we are as fans, whether it's the ownership that are, that's another question.
Goodness
What we
me.
do, T, yes or no?
19 years old. I mean, like you said, 300 minutes thus far under his belt. Playing out the position, let's say yes. Let's be positive. Let's be glass half full and say yes.
Miles, what are you going to say? I feel like you're not going to say yes.
No, I'm going to say I think Spurs will trigger it. But I believe, what everyone has to understand is we're not actually paying anything for him. That's the bit that people
With the Harry Kane money.
They still owe us money. Correct.
They owe us money. So
well said, mate.
Technically, it's a free transfer.
Top
technically.
Cap. Well said, mate. Yeah, well said.
Well, that's how Spurs are going to play it.
Who else owes us money?
As I said, it's all about the business.
We'll find out what the summer transfer window looks like. Just go back and see who else owes us money for debt, and we'll know where our transfer window targets are for the summer.
But it's who we are, mate.
Oh, don't get me bloody started on that one. We always win in our second season. I'll see you, Ange Postecoglou, in the summer, my son, in Bilbao. I tell you what this football club's done to me this season. I'll never forgive you. Oh, well, look, that first half coming to an end of it, I think we can all agree it was a pretty poor, disjointed first half. And look, second half, Spurs, to be fair, they had their best move by far. Porro picked out and produced a peach of a cross for Odegaard, who stabbed the ball wide of the post. And again, like with Odegaard, you're looking at a guy that has made his first start since the Coventry game. I think really hard at the moment to judge what we're seeing from Odegaard, but Ange has been consistent in saying he thinks this guy is going to really be a key player for Tottenham next season. He went on to say that he thinks he can make a big impact on the Premier League. And again, we can't forget Odegaard as well. Young player. Will again need some more time to feel gel into this Tottenham side. I mean, it's in general, it might only be his third full start for the football club. He had one shot set wide, another deflected past the post. Young player, raw pace. It just feels like a lot of these players at the moment, they are in, as Darren has said, a period of development. And with development, you are going to get good games. You're going to get bad games. That's why I've always said that, sprinkled in with some of the youth that we've got, you need some experienced heads in there. And look, you're looking at the likes of Sonny, Decky, and, those leaders, Solanke as well. I mean, I've got to say, we have had this habit, Tottenham, over the years, that when players are out, my God, doesn't their actual rating go up so much? And then when they come back, it goes zoom. We're always, as fans, we've built a player up so much when they're injured that when they've come back, as soon as they come back, we've slated them. It's like, we as a football club we're just a unique fan base. We really, really are. And that second half, really, I mean, Ange, to be fair, before Maddison decided to rugby tackle Savinho, before Danso sent a header from a free kick at Edison, which really was actually a good opportunity at the time, Ange rolled the dice. He made a number of changes. He brought Spence, Sarr, Kulusevski and Son on for a Doggy, Bentancur, Odegaard and Tel. Big cheer, I've got to say, for the introductions of Spence and Sonny, respectively. You could argue that Doggy and Odegaard probably were pre-planned. Bentancur was on a yellow as well. It then meant Kulu was playing through the middle up top with Son and Johnson either side. Big chances really for Spurs in that second half. Doggy winning the ball back, raced up the pitch, but his pass to Tel was cut out at the last moment. Great chance for a leveller. Sonny found Spence's overlap, cut back for Sarr, but his shot is headed away and almost fell to the ground in frustration. Howard Sarr missed that opportunity. I touched upon it in the earlier part of the show, Dal, coming over to you, that it does feel at the moment that both Bissouma and Sarr are almost resigned now to being bench players. And it's an interesting one because you'd probably say on the whole that Bentancur, for the performance, was probably Spurs' best outfield player. Obviously, got that yellow card that, to some degree, maybe it made it harder for his performance. But I just wonder, Dale, when it comes to our options in the summer of midfielders, we have got a plethora of midfielders now. I mean, where are Sarr and Bissouma for you now in that pecking order for Tottenham? Are they bench players in your opinion at the moment?
I think right now it's a form game, and Bissouma has lost form, and a lot of people may say in the comments he hasn't found it since we got him from Brighton, and unfortunately he's up and down, and he's a player that what we saw at Brighton, he should have been a leader in that midfield. We watched someone drag Brighton into games and into form, and was the defensive hold and then had that burst of pace and could break through lines. And he gave them a lot, and he hasn't given us that. So I would be worried for him. Pape Sarr, he's very young. He's played well at times this season. Form has dropped off as well. Would I be looking at getting rid of him? Again, I'll be looking at the rest of the season to go, what is my best option? There are a lot of players there. We still got to throw Archie Gray into the midfield. He'd never played in his position. And when he's there, how did that affect the numbers? So it's going to be interesting to see what Ange does, because there are a number of options. Bert Bell as well has shown maturity beyond his years. He's shining at the moment. Comfortable. But don't get me wrong, he's still making mistakes. There was a number of times today where he wanted to try things in dangerous areas and go, oh, his footing weren't always great at times, and he's going to learn. But who does he learn with? Does he learn watching? Is a game where you pull him out and you go, you don't need to do that? Is Maddison doing enough as a leader? I feel for Ange, because I know TJ spoke today about the ball weren't getting quick enough to the wings, and in the first half it was breaking down. A lot of that, when you watch Danso or Archie Gray pick up the ball, if you looked at the middle, they weren't showing for it at times. The players weren't going, because it's that ball where I get it and I spin it over to that player, and it wasn't happening. Maddison then dropped deep and played like a quarterback. So sometimes we create our own problems, and I think that's where Ange has to really look at what he wants in that setup and which way is going to best serve him. And I think that's going to be one where, as a fan base, we're going to be split, because everyone's going to have their favourites in that group, and ones that you'd want to keep more than others. But some are going to go. Some are definitely going to have to go.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum really that Ange is going to have there. I mean, coming over to you, Miles, that we heard reports earlier in the week that Spurs have opened preliminary talks over a new contract for Rodrigo Bentancur, who, again, I will emphasise, I think in this game itself was probably Spurs' best outfield player. Like, he got the book in that I think hampered what he could do after that. I mean, Bergvall, I thought, again, another tiny little display from him. I think Bergvall, as we've touched upon, has probably been one of Spurs' most, you've got to say, best players of this season so far. I mean, Kulusevski's right up there as well. But Bergvall's been growing week upon week in the Spurs shirt. The growth he's had has been remarkable. I've got to say, I feel like I'm saying like Ange Postecoglou now. I talk about growth, but it has been. Where are you in your mind when it comes to that midfield, Miles? It just does feel like now for Basuma and Sarr that we're looking at two players here that are very much now pretty much resigned to the bench. Do you see that changing at all? Or what do their Spurs futures look like in your opinion?
Sarr, I think, will eventually come back. I think he's been hit and miss this season. If he gets anything back to how he was last year, I think he will have a good case.
I was so excited, Miles, to let you come back in. I was so excited for Sarr's second season, and I think that we knew he had like an international tournament, didn't he, in the summer, which you could argue that maybe impacted his return time. Coming back to Tottenham may have been a reason why we've not seen the best of Sarr in this season. But I think Sarr in his day, you know, I've seen his ability. I mean, it'd be a real shame we can't see him his best at Tottenham.
But as for Basuma, if I believe he'll be gone in the summer. After the whole episode of the balloons and all that back in August, I think Ange realised he couldn't trust him. But Spurs were never going to give him the player he needed to replace him in the January transfer window or this last summer, because it was just, he had bad press against him. So he's had to physically use him this year. But I think for Basuma, I think a lot of fans have given up as well. He's at a certain age and he's not really, especially when we've been going through this bad period, he hasn't stepped up. He's not the same player that, we got from Brighton, even though we are playing in a slightly different position and got him playing a different style. But Conte didn't take to him. The fans were all going, it's Conte's fault, it's Conte's fault. But actually, in reality, you can see it under Ange. He was great for those first 10 games. He was brilliant. And then all of a sudden, he's just gone completely flat. And, when you're seeing someone like Bergvall come on leaps and bounds, Sarr, yes, he's been hit and miss, but Sarr's young too. He's not, Sarr might end up having a great season next year. And we'll be like, we'll forget, we'll write off this season with Sarr. So if Archie Gray plays in his position, then then the midfield is kind of set. Look, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Bentancur. I really do like him as a player, but I just think for him, it's not worked at Spurs because of the injuries and everything that's happened to him in between. But when he has played, we have, when he's not been around, you can blatantly see we've missed him. And stay when he's on the ball, when
there was that run he did where I think he got fouled. Just an unbelievable little run that got us a free kick. And if that's the Bentancur we can see week upon week, then it'd be great.
I can tell you what Bentancur's missing next to him in midfield is basically a Rodri, that sort of player. Because against Ipswich, let's take Ipswich on Saturday again, when in the first minute where they run through the midfield, how many times have we seen that? How many times have we come on this pod and complained about people running through our midfield? And that's where Bentancur, where he's not great at, but actually everything else that he's got, he's a great midfielder and a great squad player if we need to. So for me, it's just a case of go and get someone who can play next to Bentancur. Like when Højbjerg and Bentancur were a good partnership, no matter how much we all hated Højbjerg and thought he was limited, as a two, they were great together, and that's why Conte played them, and that's why we did end up finishing as high as we did in Conte's first season. But it is, we have got to seriously go out and buy a midfielder in the summer. I think that's where, if we can, that's where we should go and waste or go and spend most of our money on, because you can see it's very clear to this system that is where Ange is missing. And hopefully Ange has seen that, because he doesn't usually play this way. He doesn't usually have a number 6, as people have told me. But you can clearly see in the Premier League he needs it, and that will kind of. I think if we had a number 6 with all these injuries, I don't think we'd have seen the results that we've seen this season. We'd have seen better, high quality results.
I think what was quite telling is also coming to you, TJ, on Bissouma. I think you said it on previous shows, so I don't know if you keep going back and repeating yourself, but we've all really wanted it to work, haven't we, with Bissouma? We all thought, the player we saw at Brighton, can he replicate that form, but on a consistent basis for Spurs, being at a bigger club with better players? Although I feel arguably now saying better players, but look at Brighton and Bournemouth in the league. I'm thinking, what am I talking about, Rick? Shake your head, will you? It's just the nature of this season. But a viewer listener makes this point here, maybe we can't just keep saying on their day with certain players. There's got to be more consistency to rather than saying on their day. I mean, when you're hearing news, Tej, that they're looking to potentially open contract talks with Bentancur, does that give you an indication that for the moment that, probably Bissouma's going to be making his way and we're going to have to look to upgrade that midfield? Because it just feels still that we're missing at least a player there that gives us another different option. Is that fair?
Yes, it's very fair. And listen, I think all of us have probably made the point tonight that at the end of the season, Ange, if he's still there and is going to be taking us into the following season, he's got an awful lot of decisions to make. With regards to Bissouma, yes, I've said numerous times on this show, I really, really wanted it to work with him. And just when Marlon was talking about how Bentancur particularly shines when there's a really kind of solid, combative midfielder alongside him, that should have been Bissouma. He has all the physical attributes. He's a tremendous athlete. I just think his reading of the game hasn't really developed to the level that it needs to when you do take a step up from a smaller club to a bigger club. And also, I just think his decision-making has let him down. He seems to me a little bit fragile mentally, which has been a great shame because I really wanted to love the guy. With regards to Sarr, I still think he has plenty of time. And also, speaking of his athletic ability, he just never seems to get tired. He also has that sort of long, rangy muscle, which I think is very important in that kind of position. Like I'm thinking of players like, Doucouré, who's done such a great job over the years during his career in the Premier League. And I think that Sarr is more technically gifted than Bissouma. And I just think he has time on his hands. And so I still think Bentancur is a really important player, but he needs more quality alongside him. Now, here's the thing. Do we go out and buy more, or do we just go, well, listen, because I'm a huge Bergvall fan. Wow, he's developed so quickly. I think King Hoddle made the point. I don't think anyone, hand on heart, would have seen him become quite so instrumental. His first touch is just exceptional, man. He's so brave. And also, he's quick. Like he made Kovacic, who's won, just about everything that there is to win, certainly at a club level. He made him look very ordinary today. He's just an absolutely exceptional player at the age of 19 and a couple of weeks. So there's him. And then, of course, people have been screaming about it on the comments. Gray is a number 6. So maybe we have them already, guys. And if we do, then they are young. They've got time to grow and develop and, hopefully turn into a kind of really exciting, pretty devastating midfield trio that would have all come up together at Tottenham Hotspur. Happy days.
Absolutely. I can just hear some of the listeners in audio going, ones for the future, not more ones for the future. We need them for now.
But they're doing it now as well. Bergval's doing it now. He's 19. He's doing it now.
Gray's doing it now as well. But Gray is,
Gray's doing it now. Gray's a baller, dude.
Yeah.
I left that to Darren. But Gray, I hear what Marlon's saying. But the kid's playing out of position, and he's a baller, man. What an absolute gifted. And apparently his brother Harry. Apparently he's not too shabby either.
Yeah.
If we're going to bring somebody through the door. Another Harry at Hotspur, wouldn't mind that.
And I'm one for those future. They love him. They'll be sick of us by the time this comes to an end. Right, moving on. We touched upon big chances there. Look, Spurs towards the end of that game. I mean, there might be an argument that we're unlucky to not have got a point out of it. There were some chances, as we discussed, where, Spencer Maddison, lovely combination, went close. The game did see the return of Timo Werner back in a Spurs shirt. His first return since Tamworth. Yeah, even Tamworth was quite a long time ago. Yeah, Timo Werner returned in a Spurs shirt. Dell's appearance, for those that are watching this show, pretty much sums up what we saw from Werner. Nothing really of any great depth. But he's back on the pitch, and Ange Postecoglou will use him as an option because he wants to give players minutes. And got to cut to the crazy few minutes left of that game where Spurs, of course, they went close. Sarr stilled the ball from Bernardo Silva, released Johnson on the right wing, whipped it across the box. Sonny's first time shot was saved by Ederson. Danso actually made a wonderful recovery challenge in the final minutes to actually keep us in the game. And I think, again, I know Danso, you could argue, was maybe at fault for the nature of part of the build-up in the first goal. But I think that's another player, Danso, has looked really, really well suited to the way in which Ange Postecoglou wants his Tottenham team to play. And of course, when I say that, not everyone wants to see Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham play a certain way. So we can't win at the moment, that's for sure. But quite bizarre. The final minutes of that game, Man City have a goal ruled out for VAR. And after a 3.5-minute review, Haaland's effort is disallowed. The referee called of a no-goal for a handball that was checked. And the fact was that Haaland, there was no conclusive evidence to overturn the on-field decision. That meant the goal wasn't given. But it took us 3.5 minutes to come to that conclusion. I mean, it was a bizarre one, that VAR call. I mean, it feels, I think Jarred Gillet was the referee. Look, Miles, I don't like highlighting referees on the pod because I think, at the end of the day, we're in control of our own destiny when it comes to games. But I think general feeling was the referee had quite a poor game. Is that fair, Miles?
Yeah, he wasn't the greatest, but on this call, because do you know what? Anyone who watches my channel, we talk about VAR every Monday, and
VAR Mondays.
VAR Mondays. And this, I think everyone got confused to exactly why the goal ended up not being given. Gillet blew, and you heard it on the TV. He blew up to say he disallowed it for handball, but VAR was trying to find a conclusive evidence to give it. So they couldn't find any, and there was 3 points in this clip where, and I can see why it took long. Unfortunately, this is one I go, you can see why it took so long, because there was 3 incidents where it looked like it hits his arm, Archie Gray's arm, then Danzo's arm, and it just looks like it hit somebody's, but you couldn't really see it with all the angles. So unfortunately, it's one of them that will take time, because if they got anything wrong, we'd all be sitting on this pod going, oh, VAR again, VAR this, VAR that. And they looked at every single minute. And unfortunately, because there was more than one incident of where it looked like it was a handball, it just took so long. And yes, I get VAR takes ages and things like that. But when you've come to a conclusion like this, if this comes towards the end of the season and Manchester City end up having, losing out by, on goal difference, and it's because of something like a goal like this that was given that shouldn't have been, the other teams below are going to be looking at it going, well, VAR should have looked at it and really got it right. So, look, I thought they did a great job on it. I just think it just took too long. But you can clearly see why it took too long, because at every angle they showed us, did anybody sit there and go, they could see a clear handball. And I would have taken, I looked at it as a fan and went, I would have had to take that long, because you just couldn't see anywhere whether it was handball or not. And I think we all got confused because we thought they'd given the goal, not actually that he blew up to say it was handball. And that's the bit that I think, if it was even if it was the other way around, they still would have come to the same conclusion. They would have given the goal. It was just because they couldn't see anything. And it was just too many incidents in that one little clip, unfortunately, why it took so long. Because I sat there and went, I don't know if it's handball or not.
I think interestingly as well, Miles, I think that the person or the camera that would have had the best view, ironically, was actually the referee. Because we only had this angle and then another angle, which was also from a similar side. But the referee was right behind it. And so I think had he had, like, I don't know, those glasses that have the cameras on them or something, we would have actually seen. So I think it was the right call from the referee. But of course, I can understand
whether he saw it or not is a complete different scenario, because I don't think I think he took an educated guess. And it seemed to work out for him, because he could have given, if he didn't blow up at all and the goal was given, none of us would have been complaining. But because he's the way it's all gone, it's the way it is. Unfortunately, VAR's here, we've got to keep it. And it's never going to be 100% accurate. And if everyone can get that bit out of their head,
chance goes in, when they kicked up again and that Sarr and he misses that header.
You know what? I thought it was going to be Liverpool over.
I mean, just on that point, the ending of this game, it is quite dramatic. So the VAR rules out that goal, and then we had that moment down right in the game where Spurs break through, but Sarr heads over, and that really should have been the equaliser. And when I said earlier in the show, maybe we should be lucky it wasn't worse than 1-0. There'll be a lot of Spurs fans that come out of that ground now thinking, how have we not equalised and taken a point? I mean, it was the most bizarre end to a game. Andrew's got his hands on his head, and Sarr's missed a great opportunity to get us a point at the death now.
Yeah, he just couldn't get over it. Just couldn't get over it. Right move, everything about the move worked, and just couldn't get over it. And that was the game, as Marlon quite rightly highlighted earlier. Some Man City fans would say they should have been clear in the first half, but there was opportunities for us to be clear in the second half to make up for it. And just on that, just Danso's header in the first half, just what he's bringing to Tottenham. I'm excited by the prospect that he can bring, because he's good in the air, and that was a great header. And the fact that he's integrated in a back four, that he's not playing with anyone, that he's not at a regular back four. He's not at the centre back.
Chopping and changing, fullback to chopping and changing.
And dribbled it 65 yards out of his own box with Bernardo Silva in his wake.
Guys,
he's
showing a lot of the character that we need and ability.
I need to ask you all a final question. Before I do, just to recap, that Premier League table does see Spurs drop down to 13th in the table. Spurs currently, in terms of positional wise now and points wise, we are we're 9-10 points now off mid-table. Aston Villa are on 42 points in 10th. It does feel like now for Tottenham there might be a bit of a battle now to get into the top 8, top 9, top 10. I think the general feeling is now, as I said, that it's all very much kind of Europa or bust. And I know we sat here a week or so ago and suggested, can Spurs make a late surge for the European place in the Premier League? I think, just to be clear, we did win the Conference League rather than the Europa League. And it does feel like now, really, this next kind of 6-7 day break we've got is a vital one, I'd say, for the players, for the manager, for the fans. That I think, I've got to say, I don't know if you guys fall for the same. This has been a really, really challenging season. I think for all of us out there, whether you like the manager, whether you're not for the manager, whether you like some of the players, whether you don't like some of the players, where you stand on the board right now, which seems a unanimous one, I think we all are very, very disillusioned by where we are at the moment in our season, end of February. The fact we're out of the League Cup, the FA Cup, our position in the Premier League does make the Europa League now really kind of such an imperative nature for the rest of the season. Sorry, Dakota, I'm not sure I can save you. And Postecoglou could, though. He could. On that point, let's close it on this final question to everybody. What are we expecting in these next couple of months ahead here? I mean, Siege will be with us every step of the way. I mean, how big is this double-legged tie in the Europa League? Not just for Ange's job, but for the season for Tottenham as well. Because, I mean, you've seen it on the show here, and it's not the first week we've seen this. There's so many probably questions now more than answers. Not just on the manager, I'm talking about a lot of players. You know, we sat here tonight and we've discussed where Pedro Porro's future is long-term. You know, is Matthias Tel going to be a Tottenham player beyond next season? What our midfield looks like? The debates over Sarr, Basuma, Bentancur going to sign a new deal. I think there's a lot more questions than there is answers at the moment, Teach.
That's absolutely a correct and accurate appraisal. You know, we're in a pretty precarious position at the moment. To your point, Rick, this has been a particularly challenging season, even for Tottenham Hotspur fans. However, I think that also it's been a tremendously galvanizing season, you know, dare I say, unprecedented in that resolve, where thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not potentially even millions of Tottenham Hotspur fans all over the world have really banded together in a common cause, which is a change in how the club is run. And we are fed up of chanting it and singing it and tweeting it and, you know, vlogging about it and whatever. We've actually put boots on the ground and I feel have conducted ourselves in a way that makes me, however many thousands of miles away I am over here in Los Angeles, has made me very, very proud in the manner that it's been conducted and managed. Change for Spurs have had a huge hand in that. You, Ricky, have had a huge hand in that. Marlon, Darren, you know, all of the panelists, this show, the viewers and the listeners have had a huge hand in that. And so whilst the football has been torrid and results have been so poor at so many times in all of the competitions that we've played in, I think that we, the fans, have reacted in such a positive way. And listen, either saying, you know, Levy out, or it's just a change of how it's done. Levy can stay if he starts writing checks that are going to attract the top players. But we are all calling for the way that this club is run from the very top to change, because we've had enough. And so, yes, it's been a tough season, but I, for one, I'm proud of the Tottenham brothers and sisters out there who've come together with great grace and in great numbers and done it in the right way. And so I, for one, am proud that has occurred this season.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tej, can't put it better. I mean, we appreciate it and thank you so much. I mean, look, I know there's some out there that, you know, I hope we haven't skirted over some of the points. Now, we have put it out there, you know, 14 losses in 27 games isn't acceptable, and nor is the fact we've had 7 home defeats in 14 Premier League games, where it is unacceptable for a club that, and for a fan base that have to pay, as fans, you know, maybe the highest ticket price in the country to go and watch their team at home. It isn't good enough. And, you know, to have seen home form where, you know, 7 defeats at home, 5 wins, 2 draws, 50% losses at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I mean, Miles, we can understand why there's such disillusionment right now. I mean, how big is next week for Tottenham in terms of AZ Alkmaar? And do you agree that at the moment we've got a lot more questions than we have answers right now going into this remaining part of the season?
Oh, of course, Ricky, all the time. But that goes for most seasons under ENIC. We end up asking more questions than the answers we get. Even when we finished second, the question was, are we going to take that next step? And were ENIC going to finally back Pochettino to, you know, especially with us moving to Wembley at the time, and create a title-winning team? We obviously got our answers, as we do, and we always end up running through this each season. But yeah, this season has been challenging. However, I just have to say, all the last word on Spurs audience, Ricky, you, every single person on the panel, we have got together and we have, you know, we've got through this together. Like, we've had some therapy sessions between each other, and that's been the biggest thing. And like you said, the comments have been up and down, but we've all been there for each other. And that's one thing that's been constant, as all us Spurs fans and everyone in the YouTube community, everyone at the stadium, we have stuck together. And I think that's what's key. Like, we might be split on certain things, but we're all after one common goal, and we all love Spurs. And that's the reason why we're all like sitting here going there. And that's what I have to say, like, for how difficult it's been, we have, like, the whole fan base. This is why I remember being a Spurs fan back in the 90s when we used to be, you know, as people say, we used to be crap. But we all stuck together. If you were a Spurs fan, we just looked up at each other and went, yeah, we know what's going on. And that's the same way it's been this season. So you got to love it, Rick. At the end of the day, I think we've all we're all showing how we want to move forward with this club, but this club is, it's Daniel Levy's Tottenham. So we at the end of the day have all come together, and it's been absolutely brilliant.
Bless
and
you,
that's
Mars.
one thing.
Yeah. I've got to say spot on. I mean, I have to say the amount of comments I get after so many of the shows that we do and just say, if only the team performed as well as the last one on Spurs did week to week, we'd have such a successful football club. I think that's the one thing that I would hope the many out there that listen and watch this show, the one thing we've always tried to be is consistent in terms of finding that right balance week upon week, because we want the conversations to be listenable. We don't want it to be particularly draining. We'll cover what we can cover, but there's only so much we're going to say that is going to please everybody. And then when we have an audience out there of 70, 80,000 a week that either respectively listen to the show or download the show, I'm also acutely aware as the host driving it, going to be impossible to keep everybody happy. There's going to be some that will say I'm too harsh. There'll be some that I'm going to say I'm not harsh enough. So it is really, really tricky being a fan at the moment. That's why I make that joke. I can't wait for that summer holiday. As you guys know out there, it's a running joke that I've got, again, lovely wife, 2 kids under the age of 5. By the time I have that holiday, I can't wait to get back. But God knows what I'm going to come back to. Now, let me close it with you. As I've said throughout the show, you are one of the most optimistic people in the Spurs community, and we're blessed to have you on this show. I know for you as well, it's been a challenging season. You're having debates with people out on the street and trying to, make your reason. It's hard, isn't it? It's really hard right now where we are, and it just feels everything now is kind of Europa or bust. Is that a fair point of where we are right now?
Yeah, well, it's been, as everyone said, I echo every comment by Marlon, by TJ, by yourself. It's been hard, but we've been a family and we stick together. And as much as we argue, we're family at the end of the day. In the comments, they argue back and forth. Tomorrow, we're all family again. And if a Tottenham fan's getting it from an Arsenal fan, Liverpool fan, we're going to stand next to them and we're going to back them. We're going to be there as a unit. And that's what we do. And right now, we have one opportunity to turn this horrible season into something where we can all come together and celebrate and to love the team that we all love. We chose this team. Some people got given this team. We can't divorce it.
Just to be clear, Dale, just want to make it clear, just disclaimer, I did not get a choice. If I had got a choice, I mean, I might be on a different podcast, but I did not get a choice, just to be clear. I was forced into this.
And that's the thing.
I chose this.
Hey, Marlon, I've got no blame. You've got no shame whatsoever. You've got no choice. You've chosen this. Sorry.
But once we've got it, we can't get rid of it. And that's the beauty of football. That's the beauty of being a fan. Once you pitch your colours, once they've been handed to you, you can't get away from it. You can't run away from it. And right now, we have one more opportunity this season where, as a fan base, we could do something that will put a smile on everyone's face, that will bring us together, what will make us go, this was a good season because of that. That's the win. That's what we can take from it. A lot of sides, let's look at our neighbours. They've got nothing to win right now. They've got nothing they can win. They've got no smile to put on their face. There's nothing that can redeem this season. We have one still, and that's a great place to be, and we're lucky to have that. And let's hope, and as I say, all we can ask for is hope. Let's hope that can be the redeeming factor of this season, and we can leave it on a high. Let's see what we can do.
I completely love there as Dow's dismissed them for the Champions League. We're not going to go on to that debate. Look, dismissed. Not even a conversation.
Dismissed.
Guys, I want to say a massive, massive thank you to the wonderful actors in the land of TJ Ramini and Darren Hartman, and just me and Miles on the side there over at the Spurs Kings. Please check him out. Guys, thank you so much for your support as always. Nearly 8,000-9,000 of you watch the show live. Really appreciate it. As T says it often, I'll say it as well. Go and hit that subscribe button, go and hit that like button, share this to a wider Spurs audience. Look, we appreciate tough times right now. And like for all of us, I think, we're gonna have and need this rest over the next 5-6 days to recharge the batteries, regalvanise the squad of the last one Spurs, that is, as well. And we're going to come back to you, of course, for the AZ Alkmaar game, which is a massive, massive game for the football club, and one where we know 2 games that are going to very much decide where this season is at. It's a game that has probably, as you said, offered more questions than answers. Let's see if we get some of those answers a week in coming. I want to say a massive thank you to the boys. Darren Hartman, TJ Ramini, Marlon at Spurs Kings, from the Last One on Spurs family. Thank you so much as always. We've been the Last One on Spurs. Take care. And as always,